Well, we are in a series called Ruins and Risings. We're in the book of Nehemiah. And how many of you have enjoyed this series? It's been good. Has it been challenging? Good. I'm so glad to hear. Thank you, Dylan. Yes. I don't ask that. I don't I probably should have after the third message just to make sure y'all were picking what I'm putting down. But it's so important because God's word is alive and active. It's sharper than any two-edged sword. It's able to divide between soul and spirit, bone and marrow, and it's very good at what it does. And I believe that even in a book in the Old Testament that might seem obscure, might seem outdated, that there is still power. There is still Jesus interwoven into the scriptures, and that's what we're learning about through Ruins and Rising. See, this is about God's plan for restoration. If you didn't notice this within a few short weeks of being brought into this world, that this world is messed up. You don't get what you want. You often cry about it, and then others make fun of you for crying about it, right? And so, that's just the story of a child, is like you got to kind of like bring the child up. But this is God's plan for each of us, is that we live in a world that is broken down, and God wants to bring restoration to it. The story of Nehemiah beginning, for those of you who are kind of coming on board, maybe it's your first Sunday with us, to give you a brief history of what's happened in the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is for us a picture of the Holy Spirit's work in our life. Nehemiah's name means helper, comforter, one who comes alongside. Isn't that encouraging? And Nehemiah comes in to help the people of Jerusalem finish a work that had been started 80 years prior but had stalled out. Rest of the development, it just was not happening. Now, what happened about 160 years before that is that the nation of Israel experienced an invasion from a neighboring country called Babylon. Babylon comes in and sacks Jerusalem, completely destroys the city, and takes all of the inhabitants of Jerusalem out of Jerusalem into Babylon, into captivity. And so over the course of within about a generation, people begin to trickle back into what was called the Promised Land, or Jerusalem specifically. They begin to inhabit the surrounding areas, but it's still under the rule of what would in Nehemiah's time be the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire sacks Babylon. But here's what's happening through all of it, is that God is accomplishing his purposes. And so we get to see that as that unfolds from one kingdom rising, falling, and then rising again. And a guy by the name of King Artaxerxes, who is king over the Persian Empire, oversees about 50 million constituents or conquered people. And one of those people is a guy by the name of Nehemiah. Nehemiah has the privilege of serving as cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, which means that he's kind of like a valet. He's a personal assistant. He's the guy who makes sure that the wine that's being served to the king isn't poisoned. So there's a high level of trust, a high level of responsibility that's given to Nehemiah. And so Nehemiah is very well respected. Well, what happens in Nehemiah's life is that he begins to, he catches word and begins to hear about his home city, his hometown of Jerusalem, which what he understood was that people had been let go to go back and repopulate the city, begin rebuilding. And he has his brother come and give him a report on the state of the city. And what's happening is, and I want to draw the analogy that what is happening in Jerusalem and what's happening in Nehemiah is a work that is very similar to what God is doing in our lives, and that our souls are kind of like cities. And so the question I have for you today is, if your soul was a city, what's the crime rate? If your soul's a city, how's the housing? How are the walls? How are the doors? How's the infrastructure? How's the sewage? So for the nation, for the people of Jerusalem, it was completely and utterly destroyed. Yet people were there trying to make a life. And what we find out very quickly is that Nehemiah has an assignment. And I want to share with you this morning that every single one of us has an assignment, and it's not unlike Nehemiah's assignment. Because if our soul is a city, then we need to pay attention to the walls of our soul. And we need to think about the things that have come in and the things that go out, because the kingdom of your soul, what's going on inside of you, will rise and fall to the level of your awareness of what's there and your awareness to your assignment. If the walls are up and the city's great, keep the walls. But if the walls are broken down and the gates are burned with fire, you've got some work to do. And newsflash, every single one of us has got something to work on. Amen? Am I alone in that? We all got something to work on. So the first point I want to share with you this morning is that you have an assignment. Say, I've got an assignment. All right, when I was a sophomore in high school, I took algebra. I wasn't very good at math. Any math nerds in the house? Okay, so Jamie, I know Jamie got some calculus people in here. Okay, so math, I was just like, what is the point? So you take a 16-year-old male, put him in a math class with all of his friends and all of the distractions are already in the world, and you try to teach him algebra in a class with 30 people. Like, how about that, student to teacher ratio? It wasn't happening in Missouri. So I'm sitting rather close because I already know I'm not good at math, not good at algebra anyway. And so I'm trying, I really am trying. So I get through the first semester, C minus, and I get into, somebody just laughed at me. You're like, you're not doing too bad, C minus, right? I get into the second semester, and I'm struggling. I got a D now. And the teacher, I would go up and I would ask the teacher, for help. But it was more like, hey, I think I got this figured out. Can you just affirm me and tell me that I'm doing it right? And he's like, no, you're not doing it right. Would you follow instructions? And so here's what happens is that every single one of us will have an assignment. Do you get it? Do you get your assignment? See, I didn't get algebra, and so what had to happen was I had to have a tutor. And so after school on Tuesdays, I had to meet with a tutor. And in Missouri, in the town in Rolla, my town is full of math nerds. It's an engineering university, Missouri Science and Technology, so there is no shortage of math nerds in Rolla, Missouri. So getting a math nerd to come and teach me math, that was not a problem. Getting me to actually go to it and show up and humble myself and receive the help that I needed to get the assignment done, that was another thing. But I did, and I showed up, and what I found was that even in the challenge of it, asking for help, receiving help was imperative upon me finishing the assignment. So many of us are struggling through the algebra classes of our life, or for some of us, it's calculus, it's whatever, maybe it's PE, I don't know. But we're failing the assignments. We're failing the assignments, and the assignment is your soul. The assignment is the good work that God created every single one of us to tend to, that if the walls are up and if the gates are put in place, will produce worship, and worship is enjoyment. It's rightful. It's rightful positioning and direction of the affections of your heart towards a person, and the person who made you, who you were made for. And if you could imagine making something and it was animated, had free will, wouldn't you appreciate it acknowledging you? And so, but that's why you were made, because like anybody who is given incredible giftings and incredible responsibility, you're going to spoil those things. You're going to fail miserably in your assignment. First of all, if you don't know you have an assignment, or if you are taken off assignment and you're doing something else other than your assignment. So what I want to share with you this morning is the title of the message is called "It Is Finished." But I wanted to, before we get there, I wanted to make sure you all know you have an assignment. Everybody say, I have an assignment. I have an assignment. Okay, good. So here's what happens with assignments is that we have to have direction for those assignments. Every single one of us We're given God-given talents and abilities. But what's happening is that we have lost the source of our assignment. We didn't know. You may be good at math. You may be good at art. You may be good at athletics. You may be good at any number of things, and that's some indication of what your assignment is. But the biggest assignment that you have isn't those things. It is recognizing the source of your assignment. See, until you even know what class you're in, you've got to recognize where the source of the assignment is. A lot of us, we think we have a wild idea of what we're going to do with our lives. But then what happens is that we begin to second guess our decisions. We begin to second guess the things that the opportunities that are put in front of us. And so what happens is that we end up missing our assignment. Either we don't do it at all, or we end up stuck in help class. But I want to encourage you from our story here, Nehemiah is on assignment. Nehemiah is on assignment. And here's what has to happen is that when you know your assignment and you are sourced in your assignment, which is what Nehemiah was. Nehemiah had authorization from the king. The first thing that you have to ask yourself, does this please the king? Is what I'm doing with my time, my talents, my treasures, honor the king? Does this please the king? We find that in the story is that Nehemiah lays out his plan to King Artaxerxes. Artaxerxes says back, oh yes, this is a good plan. Yes, I like this. It pleases me. And what's true with Nehemiah and Artaxerxes is true with us and the one who is sovereign over this world. That there is a king who rules and reigns over this world. He's already set in motion plans and purposes for all of our lives. He has a direction and a current that things are created to go in to produce flourishing and to create peace and prosperity in our lives. And when we step outside of that assignment, we experience the opposite of that. We experience frustration. We experience fruitlessness. We work and work and work, but we don't get back what we have expended or invested to return back. Am I alone in that? Like you're working away at this. Could be a relationship, could be a job opportunity, but whatever it is, you just feel like you're spinning your wheels. You're not getting anywhere with it. Could it be that either one, you're on the wrong assignment or you're not being sourced in your assignment? See, every assignment has a source, has one who has spoken what the assignment is. And what he has spoken, he will also provide. See, this is what's going on with Nehemiah. Nehemiah has authorization to carry out this good work, this great work he sees, finishing what his parents couldn't finish, finishing what his great-grandparents couldn't finish. And so it wasn't just about rebuilding these walls. It was about setting in motion the future prosperity and peace of Jerusalem. See, in the Old Testament, God gave his people a temple. But in the New Testament and in Christ, he gives his people to be a temple. And so what he's doing in Jerusalem is an indication and a sign of what he wants to do by displaying his glory, his power, and his purposes in our lives. Does that make sense? Okay, so I want to make it real simple here. One of the reasons why I didn't do well in algebra was because I had 30 distractions around me. And what will happen invariably on your assignment is that there will be people that will come into your life and tell you, you don't have authorization, you're not strong enough, you're not smart enough, you don't have enough money to make that happen. What you're doing is feeble work. This is what the people of Jerusalem had heard for the previous 80 years. They were told that they have no right to rebuild Jerusalem. They don't have the money to rebuild it, and they're weak and they're feeble. And so Nehemiah comes along and begins to speak strength to his people. What does he do? He says, hey, we need authorization. I got it. We need provision. I got it. We need manpower. Hey, look around you. Grab a part of the wall. And let's work at it with all of our hearts. And what begins to be set in motion is really something that couldn't have been done any other way, because why? You need authorization. You need to be sourced in your assignment. And so what happens? You've got a gift. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 6 says this. For this reason, I remind you to fan and to flame the gift of God, which is in you through the laying on of my hands. So many of us, we forget that there's power for the purposes that God has for our life. But it's our responsibility to stir that gift up. And so what does Nehemiah do? He falls back on his authority. He falls back on the fact that the king has decreed it. The king has declared it. And so let's be mindful that the same king who has authorized us is going to provide for us and going to care for us. But what will happen, this is a second point that I want to encourage you with, is that in your building and in your assignment, people will try to take you off task. You will be invited to temptations from your past. It doesn't mean that you have to take them. So second point here is don't give in. Don't give in. First one is you have an assignment. Number two, don't give in. Don't give in. You're going to want to give in as you begin this new life, this great work that God has for your life. Are you kidding me? Like the healing of childhood wounds, the salvation of not just me, but of my family, that all of the brokenness and the DNA of previous generations, it just kind of it's like nuts falling out of trees hitting us left and right. Like where is all this coming from? You can't figure out which branch it came from. But you're being assaulted by things so far back generationally. They're just making their way down to you. It could be alcoholism, it could be infidelity, adultery, it could be lying, stealing, cheating. Just these things are just like, that's just what, fill in the family name. That's just how we are. Those are just our people. But the fact of the matter is this, is that your DNA and the complications that have happened are because of compromises to the purposes or the assignment that your parents had. That's no less your assignment. But today you may be hearing this for the first time, is that you have power to finish the assignment. That what your parents couldn't do, God's saying, this is your season. This is your day. Okay? You may have, growing up, you're like, man, I know that there's more to life. This is it. You showed up to hear it. This is it. This is the more to life. And so Nehemiah he hears this, and we're going to talk about a guy named Sanballat. Some of you know about Sanballat, so we're going to call him Sins-a-lot today. Because Sanballat has a strategy. As the great work is underway, he's wanting to take Nehemiah off of assignment. Your assignment, those things that have caused you pain, but now you're passionate about it. It haven't caused you so much pain that you're paralyzed, but you have passion now to make a difference about it. But not only that, you have the giftings, you have the authorization for it. Guess what happens? The people around you or the forces of darkness start to sweat. The opposition, it begins to wear them out. So this is what happens. We get three stooges that show up. You guys remember the three stooges? The name is Sanballat. He's the biggest one of he's so dumb. Tobiah, who is he's an Ammonite. Okay, Sanballat is a Samaritan. This is a mixed, compromised people group. Tobiah comes from an Ammonite people. These were all people that in wars with Israel for years. And then there's the Arabs, which represent the greater Middle Eastern population by a guy named Geshem. And so Tobiah is kind of like he's infiltrated. He has family on the inside. But Sanballat is just there, and he's sweating because he knows that if Jerusalem gets up and running, that if Nehemiah is successful in this endeavor, that he's going to lose economically. He's no longer going to be the power broker in the area, that all of that's going to shift down to Jerusalem. Let me tell you this much, that when you begin to tend to the things of God in your life, when you begin to tend to the rebuilding of the walls in your life, you begin putting those gates back in place, the worshiping him, and bringing back into your life the peace and the prosperity that comes from knowing him and walking with him, that the enemy begins to sweat. And things from your past will try to call you out, or the world around you will try to call you out. Here's what happens. You start serving the Lord. You give your heart to Jesus, and you're saying, wow, like God has put me in a new path, new direction, with new life, new path. Like wow, I didn't know life could be this way. Then all of a sudden, you get an invitation on Facebook, and it's from an old flame. And say, hey, just found you on Facebook all of a sudden. And like, oh wow. You're like, well, I don't really have a good reason not to like befriend this person. And then before you know it, that's an invitation. And let me tell you this much, just because you're invited doesn't mean you have to go. Okay? There are so many invitations that exist in the world of temptation and compromise. Here's the antidote to that. We see this in Nehemiah. He says this to Sanballat. Why should I, let's go there, when word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, three stooges, that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap was left in it through up to that time, I had not set the doors in the gates. Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message, come let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. Okay, let's just take a moment here. All right? You're invited to temptation. What do you say? Oh no, that's so easy. Let's go home. Y'all got it. Let's do another one. God has a plan. And that's not it. Come on, someone was in first service. God's got a plan, and that's not it. Okay, God's got a plan, that's not it. So when you recognize the temptation when it happens, the only way that you're going to overcome that is by staying so steadfast and fixed on the project at hand, knowing that as you do, God's going to continue to build you up and strengthen you. So every temptation is a signal for perseverance. Every pressure you feel is a signal to overcome. The problem is that we lose our source. We get tired. We grow weary. But what Nehemiah says, and I love this, he goes on, they were scheming to harm. He goes on to say this. So I sent messengers to them with this reply. I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave and go down to you? Why should I go down to you? Now, one of the things I do know about mathematics is that there is a common denominator. And the lowest common, you're looking for the lowest common denominator to try and figure out what the, like how it's related to the whole. What the people around you, what this world and the agenda of this world is to not celebrate you. They don't want to empower you. They don't want to strengthen you. They want to strip you of your God-given power and authority, of the potential that you have to produce life around you. Every human being is given by God the power and the ability to walk with God, partner with God as you know him and as you're in relationship with him, that he's put inside you talents, abilities, and given you resources. This world, we see this in the very first, in the second chapter of Genesis, that creation, Adam and Eve are given this world to subdue it, fulfill the earth, be fruitful and subdue it. What does that mean? It means take the raw materials and do cool stuff with it that gives me glory. I mean, that's why he put metals like gold and things like that on the earth. That's why he put things like silicon and to create microchips and to create computers. And I mean, like all of the created things around us are because of God's creative power working in us. Now, when that gets off assignment, gets distracted, or gets called out to the plain of Ono for a meeting with Sanballat, begins to get meddled in with the agendas of this world, those plans and purposes begin to lose their God-given potential. And what happens is that those things begin to be lent to the world, and they do what the world does. You want to know what the enemy does? Where there is life, he wants to snuff it out, wants to destroy it. Where there's beauty, he wants to deface it. Where there's purity, he wants to pervert it. And so you see that in this world that the tactic is always meant to pull the thread out, get to the bottom of everything, and then realize we have nothing. You take God out of it, you do have nothing. And that's the problem with our world. It can be two things. One is that when you pull that out, you have what you call nihilism, nothingness. Nothingness. And when you have nothingness, then anything goes. Everybody's their own God. Everybody has their own path. Everybody has their own, you name it. Or on the other hand, you have what you call tyranny, which is a close relative to anarchy. One begets the other, and the other, eventually people get tired and restless of having their own way, and they say, oh, give us a king. And the king becomes a tyrant. Do you understand? Those are the two tensions. And, we've been living in relative anarchy in America. But there's a conversation with the world that we've given ourselves to, even in the church and even as believers. We've compromised. We've let the world in. And we've come down from the great work that God's called us to. And I want to invite you to come back up to it. Come back up and put your hands to the task. This is the second thing that we have here. Oh, first of all, this happens 4 times. He's invited 4 times into this conversation. And the 5th time, he sends a letter to Sanballat sends a letter to Nehemiah. And this letter is full of threats. See, after having done all that you can do to stand, there is a second part that you're supposed to do, and that's called stand. You keep standing, okay? But if you're not sourced, you can lose strength and you can lose heart. And this is where Nehemiah finds himself. You can be resisting the devil all day long. James 4:9. You can resist the devil and flee temptation and draw near to God. God draws near to you, and you begin to experience the power and the purpose being back in relationship with him. But what happens is that there will be attacks on your family. It can attack your health. It can attack your finances. It can attack your job, your security. It can attack your relationships. And this is what Sanballat's trying to do here. What he does is he says, hey, it's been reported to me among the nations. This is in verse 5. We can pick it up here. The 5th time, Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message, and in his hand was written an unsealed letter in which was written, here's what you got to know, is that the accusations and the things that the enemy would try to bring against you have no authority. The letter's unsealed. The letter has no power. Just because you're given an invitation doesn't make it a subpoena. Just because he draws up evidence from your past of the person that you used to be doesn't mean that you have to go put on those old clothes and meet him out in the plain of Ono and have that conversation. As you're resisting him and as you are pulling back and saying, I'm set to the work, I'm doing the good work, what he will do next is he will try to come in and begin stirring up controversy. Melissa's laughing at me. I had to do this twice. What happens is that he begins to attack your character, begins to attack your family. And what he does here, I love this. He just continues to say, you don't have what it takes to finish this project. He goes on in verse 9. Skip on down there. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work. It will not be completed. How many of you, sometimes you feel like, man, I just don't have what it takes. I don't know how to keep standing up. I don't know how to keep doing this. This is real stuff. Is the clarity of the assignment is so clear of who you should be and what you should be. But sometimes the strength and the power to do it escapes you. What Nehemiah does in this is he reminds them, and he prays to God. And this is what we have to be reminded of, is that we have a source for our assignment. And that source is God. And say, God, you put it in my heart to obey. You put it in my heart to see my family serve you, to honor you. You put it in my heart to work back the curse of all of the things that have happened in my family's lives. And you said that I'm a new creation. You said that you have plans for me, plans for peace, not to harm me, to give me a hope and a future. And God, why is it that everything around me is falling apart? God, this is a good work. Strengthen my hands. Strengthen my hands. You know how you strengthen your hands for the work? You remember God's promises. And you get surrounded by God's people. What he does, we can pick it up in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 3. This is about Jesus. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. We have one who's gone ahead of us. We have one who's finished the assignment. We have one who's already turned it in. That's who I want tutoring me through life. That's the one who I'm going to go to be strengthened when I don't know how to finish the assignment. When people around me are telling me, you're too dumb, you can't pay attention, or you're so poor you can't pay attention. That's good. Was that good? She's got an eyebrow raised at me. But, as you think about like the things that can become very real in moments of like, it's no longer just like being tempted to sin. It's like the brokenness just comes in waves against you and against your family. Like a sequence of repairs that have to be made around your house and your vehicle. And it's like, why do people ever buy all of their appliances together just so that the person who inherits your house later has to replace them all at the same time to the tune of like $10,000? I know where I got that. He has strength for you. 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 7 says this, for the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. Those are the three key ingredients to finishing the assignment. And so what God has for us is this gift that we have to stir up. And as we stir it up, what does he do? He gives you power, right? But he gives you love. Love for those around you who are incensed against you. But it also gives you self-discipline, or what some scriptures say, or what some versions say is a sound mind. That in the midst of all of the crazy, all the busy, all of that, I'm anchored, I'm rooted in my assignment, and I'm sourced in my assignment. And I know who he began a good work is faithful to finish it. Philippians chapter 1, verse 9 says this, 1:6, being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. Does that encourage you? Okay? Unfinished work has a place to go and be completed. And so we don't give in. We don't give up. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31 says this, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint. We just got to call on the Lord and say, God, here I am. I need help. Strengthen me. Strengthen the work of my hands. Number 4. Keep showing up. Keep showing up. Know your assignment. Don't give in. Don't give up. But keep showing up. See, this has to do with character. This has to do with, as things begin to bust apart and fall apart, there is this work that God has done in your heart as he's changed you and he has made you into the whole human that you are in your becoming in Jesus. And that's called integrity. It means that you can't be divided down anymore. Y'all are like, he does know math. Integer, okay? It's an indivisible number. But we're also meant to be indivisible too. What does that mean? That means that you can't dilute me. You can't break me down any more past this part. And this is what happens with Nehemiah. So all of this is coming unraveled, unfolding all around him, and it gets to the point where he gets a death threat. He shows up at what he thought was a friend's house. Turns out the friend's plotting against him. Turns out there's a false prophet here prophesying lies to him. But he sniffs it out. And he falls back on this. He falls back on the work. He falls back on what God has made him to be, on who he is. And he says, I'm sorry, I can't go beyond this point. Although you want to take my life, he's asking him to go back and retreat into the house of God. And sometimes religion can be religion, we can hide behind that. And that can be a ploy or a scarecrow of who we truly are. And to the world around us, it can look like we're bigots. It can look like we're haters, or you name it, whatever the world's calling us. And if you retreat back, it says this in verse 10. One day I went to the house of Shemaiah, son of Deliah, the son of Mehetabel, who was shut in at his home, he said, let us meet in the house of God inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors because men are coming to kill you. By night, they are coming to kill you. But he says this, should a man like me run away? Or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go. You understand, there comes a moment where you have to realize, hey, if it costs me my life, I'm going to play the man. I'm going to play the part. There's a story in the book of 2 Samuel, I believe chapter 10, maybe verse 12. And the story is about Joab and his brother Abishai. See, Israel was fighting the battle of its life that would determine the course of David's rule and the security of his borders against the nations of Syria and the Ammonites. You guys remember the Ammonites? So this is our buddy Tobiah, his people. And what happens, he says this. Be of courage. This is chapter 10, verse 12. Be of courage. Let us play the man for our people. It says in the standard version, play the man for our people. Should a man like, do we have it? Second. You don't got it? Okay. All right. Be of courage and let us play the man for our people and the cities of our God. This is a battle cry, but it has to do with us holding on to our character, holding on to the work that God has began in us, and he's faithful to finish it, but we got to hold on to it and say, I'm sorry, if it costs me my life, I don't care. But I'm not going to retreat. I'm not going to fall back. I'm going to show up. And there's situations that we have to continue showing up. You may feel like on a Sunday morning that you're dead, that all hell is broken loose. But if you show up in the house of God, you're going to be encouraged. You're going to be stirred up. You're going to be empowered. You're going to be strengthened. You're going to be reminded of your assignment. And you're going to be reminded of the power available to you to finish your assignment. And so as Nehemiah is continuing to hold the line, you remember what's at stake here, generations of people before him who could not finish the work. And what happens in this moment is a defining moment for him, because what happens next is that we begin to see that the people around him are terrified. It says this in verse 16, when all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence, because they realized this work had been done with the help of our God. You see, a lot of people don't know that God is doing the work. God will help us. God will finish it. That's our last point, number 5 here. God will finish it. How does he finish it? Well, he gives us a person. That person's Jesus. And Jesus comes into our rubble, very much like Nehemiah comes into the rubble of Jerusalem. And he begins to build the walls, begins to encourage the people. I have the authority to do this. I have the provision to do this. You stick with me and we'll get this project done. What hadn't happened in 80 years happens in 52 days because God's in it. Amen. Because God helps his people. You might be looking at generations of things that have not been accomplished. You may have come from maybe your grandpappy sold the farm because he had a gambling problem or an alcohol problem. You name it. You fill in the thing on the plane of, oh no, that he had an issue with your grandma or whoever it is, but you know that your family has not recovered from that yet. There is help. There is a God who is here, a God who wants to help, and he is able. He's got the authority to do it. He's got the provision to do it. We just need to say, it's finished. It's as good as finished. If Jesus did it, it's as good as finished. His work is my work. I want to remind you, he who began a good work is faithful to finish it. What unfinished assignment are you struggling with today? What unfinished business? There are just some things just like, man, I really blew it here and I don't know how to go back to that and fix that. Well, God's the God of second chances. God's the God of returning to the rubble and rebuilding it. God is the God of, he didn't just say Jerusalem's a lost cause. No, he sent a helper. And humanity is not a lost cause. He has sent a helper. He sent his own son. but he also sent us the power of his Spirit. And he gave us a church that we can work this out and stir this up and see it realized among us now that God is here and God is working. And so I want to encourage you this morning, if there is something, if you have unfinished business, hey, this could just be a car in your garage that you're just like, I need help to get that thing fixed. I need to get the motor running. Or it could be that you have a relationship that's stalled out, that needs to be restored. There's power to do that. There's love to do that. And God's going to give you the mind to do that. Isn't that encouraging? The first thing is recognizing the rubble around you, not being overcome or overwhelmed by it, but saying, God, I need help here. The last point here, that God will help us. I think that probably just needs to be our cry this morning, our invitation. And I'm going to ask Austin to go ahead and come up here. Pastor Austin. He has the answer for your enemies. He has the strength for you to persevere. He has the character for you to play the part. He has help for you. God has a plan, and this is it. This is it. That you would be presented before him, whole, spotless, piece by piece, brought back together. And if you've been doing it alone, and it's probably what had happened for 80 years, the city of Jerusalem had a bunch of people who were just doing their own thing, and it took a Nehemiah to come in and say, hey, let's do this together. Let's work this together. It didn't serve your grandpa well, it didn't serve your dad well to just take care of his own part and not think about the whole of it. That's where the church fails, is when we realize, when we fail to realize that we're only as strong as our lowest common denominator. We got to continue to lift up those who are struggling, those who are off assignment, and say, hey, come on, there's help for you. There's one who's finished the project. We need to look to him. He's the author, right? So it's his story. It's his project. He started all of this. All we got to say is, hey, can you finish what you started? Melissa said this within the first couple weeks prophetically about this church. And I'll never forget it. It's in my heart. God can. God will. Watch him. It's finished. It's finished. All we got to say is, all right, God, finish me. Finish me. I'm in, I'm on. We honor his finished work, and he finishes our work. That's how it happens, okay? We're going to go ahead and stand, but I want those of you who do have maybe an unfinished assignment, there's an unfinished project in your heart. It could look like your soul as a city, and you're just saying, my walls are down, my gates are burned, fire, things are coming in and going out, and I have no control over it. You need help. You need a Nehemiah to come in. You need Jesus to come in. You need his Spirit. You need his people. There's help for you. And so I'm going to pray right now that you receive that power that you need to finish the assignment. Heavenly Father, I pray right now, God, that in this house and in your people, we pick up the work again. Just say, God, help us. We recognize I have an assignment. You've given me good work to do. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep showing up because God is my help. God is my strength. God is my source. And so I am not alone, and I am not ashamed, because he who began a good work in me is faithful to finish it. You are the author and finisher of my faith. In Jesus' name.